In every country in the world, every single one, men die by suicide at rates anywhere from 50% to 200% higher than women. Let that sit for a second. Everywhere. Across cultures, across economies, across continents. Men are dying in silence at rates that should terrify us. And here's the kicker. Half of the men who face serious mental health struggles, they never reach out for help. They just don't. They suffer alone. They white knuckle it until they can't anymore. Why? Because somewhere along the line, we got sold a story. Be a man. Don't cry. Sort out your problems. Never show weakness. Suffer quietly, or better yet, don't suffer at all. And lads, that story is killing us. It's literally killing us. But what if the most powerful, most complete man who ever lived, he didn't look anything like that? What if the Bible, the actual text, not the cultural caricature, shows us something completely different? What if silence isn't strength? What if it's the enemy? I've been thinking a lot recently about men I've admired over my years, and none of them fit the mold that we're sold online. These weren't lads who bottled up everything. They weren't the stoic types who never let the cracks show. They were present. They were honest. And crucially, they were safe to be around. I'm talking about the friend at school who'd sit with you when things were shite and wouldn't try to fix it. They'd just be there. The leaders I met as a teenager who'd pull you aside if they were struggling and ask you hard questions. Not to judge, but because he actually cared. The fella I worked with who'd admit that he was out of his depth, who'd ask for help without shame. They weren't performing masculinity. They were living it. And the strength wasn't pretending everything was grand. It was in being honest when it wasn't. Now, I haven't always been that man. I've hidden when I should have spoken. I've shut down when I should have opened up. And I've let pride keep me isolated when what I needed most was community. But I'm learning, slowly. And what I'm learning is this: the blueprint for how to be a man who survives, who thrives, who doesn't die in silence. It's already written. So let's look at what the Bible actually shows us. Not the sanitized Sunday school version, the real thing. David, the warrior king. This is the lad who killed Goliath, who led armies, who's held up as the model of biblical manhood, right? And what does he write in Psalms? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? That's Psalm 13. Or Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? That one sound familiar? That's because that's what Jesus quotes on the cross. David didn't hide his despair. He wrote it down. He sang it. He brought it before God and his people. The man after God's own heart was also the man who wept, who pleaded, and who cried out in anguish. That's not weakness. That's faith. Elijah, the prophet who called down fire from heaven. 1 Kings 18. Elijah has just been given the greatest spiritual victory of his life. He's defeated the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Fire from heaven. The people are back with God. And it's a high point, or it should be a high point. And then chapter 19 hits, right? We've talked about this in another video in more depth if you want to go back and look at it. Jezebel threatens him, and Elijah completely collapses. He runs into the wilderness, sits under a tree and says to God, I've had enough. Take my life. This is a prophet, a man who used mightily by God, and he's suicidal. How does God respond? Does he tell him to man up? Does he shame him? No, he sends an angel with food. He lets him sleep. He provides rest, nourishment, and presence. And then and only then does he gently ask, what are you doing here, Elijah? God doesn't shame vulnerability. He meets it with care. John 11, Jesus weeps at Lazarus' tomb. Not a quiet tear. The Greek word suggests deep, convulsive sobbing. In Gethsemane, he's sweating blood, begging the Father to take the cup from him if there's any other way. He leans on his friends. He asks them to stay awake with him. If the Son of God can be this honest about his pain, this open about his need for support, then lads, you're not weak for struggling. You're human. Here's what the Bible actually teaches about strength. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 10, Paul writes, "When I am weak, then I am strong." That's not a contradiction. I know it sounds like it. That's the whole point. Biblical strength isn't about self-sufficiency. It's about dependence on God. It's about knowing your limits and leaning into something bigger than yourself. Ephesians 5, we've talked about this the last time, says husbands should love their wives like Christ loved the church. And how did Christ love the church? He gave himself up for her. He bled for her. Leadership as sacrifice, not dominance. In John 13, Jesus washes the disciples' feet at the height of his power. He kneels, he serves, and then he says, "If I, the Lord your teacher, have washed your feet, you should do the same for each other." That's strength. Not the posturing, not the performance. The willingness to be known, to serve, to descend. And 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. The version of masculinity that says, never cry, never ask for help, never show vulnerability, that's not biblical. That's just fragile. It's ego dressed up as strength, and weakness dressed up as ego, dressed up as strength. And it's getting men killed. Real strength? It's about being honest about the struggle. It's asking for help when you need it. It's kneeling when the world says stand tall. So what does this look like practically? Because theology without action is just words. Brotherhood isn't optional. Galatians chapter 6 verse 2 says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you'll fulfill the law of Christ." You weren't made to do this alone. You can't be strong in isolation. It doesn't work. That's not how we were designed. You need the men around you to know your name, to know your struggles. Who will call you out when you're acting the bollocks and sit with you when you're falling apart? Small groups. Accountability. Actual friendship. Not just the lads you have the crack with down the pub. Men you can be honest with. That's not weakness. That's survival. I've got a few mates that I can text probably at 2 a.m. if I need to. We check in sometimes. We ask the real questions. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that saved me more than once. Emotional integration is spiritual work. Journaling, prayer, lament, even therapy if that's what you need. These aren't soft options. They're how you stay connected to yourself and to God. The Psalms are full of lament. About a third of the Psalms are people crying out to God in pain, confusion, and anger. That's not a bug in the system. That's the design. God wants your honesty, not your performance. If you're burying your emotions, you're not being strong. You're building a time bomb. Daily attentiveness to God. This one's simple but not easy. Notice where God shows up in the ordinary, in gratitude and in reflection. Prayer that's not just rattling off requests, a shopping list, but actually being present. Brother Lawrence called it practicing the presence of God. It's not about big dramatic moments. It's about learning to see Him in the small things, the quiet things. When you're anchored to God daily, when you're paying attention, you're less likely to drift into the isolation that kills. And lads, if you're struggling, actually struggling, talk to someone. A mate, a counsellor, a therapist, a priest, a doctor, I don't care who, just someone. Because the lie that you have to sort it out yourself, that's not from God. That's from the same voice that wants you dead. These practices aren't weakness. They're how you stay alive. They're how you stay human. They're how you reflect the God who made you. So here's where I want to land this plane. What kind of man are you becoming? Not what kind of man gets most respect online. Not what kind of man the culture says you should be. What kind of man are you actually becoming when no one's looking? Are you building a life people feel safe around? Are you honest about your struggles? Or are you white-knuckling it in silence? Are you using your strength to protect and serve? Or are you just trying to prove something? What if strength is never about not breaking, but about being honest when you do? What if being a real man means being real, full stop? I keep coming back to this phrase, dangerously good. Men who are good in a way that disrupts systems, good in a way that makes bullies uncomfortable, good in a way that reflects a God who knelt, who wept, who bled. That kind of goodness takes courage, it takes honesty, it takes willingness to be known, and that's terrifying for most of us. But here's the thing, the men who are dying in silence, they're not weak, they're just isolated. They've believed the lie that asking for help is failure, and that showing emotion is unmanly, that they have to carry it all alone. And lads, that's a lie from the pit. You are not less of a man for struggling. You're in the company of prophets, of kings, and of Christ himself. The bravest thing you can do isn't to suffer in silence, it's to speak up, to reach out, to let someone in. Start small. Text a mate. Write down what you're feeling. Pray honestly. No performance. No religious jargon. Just you and God. Find a group. Go see a counsellor. Do one thing today that moves you towards connection instead of isolation. Because the world doesn't need more men who pretend they're fine. It needs men who are brave and honest, who are strong enough to be vulnerable, who lead by kneeling, not by dominating. If you're watching this and you're struggling, actually struggling, I need you to hear this. You are not alone. You're not weak. You're not broken beyond repair. You're human. And the God who made you didn't design you to carry this alone. The men in the Bible who shaped history, they wept, they despaired, they leaned on God and on each other. And that's not a failure of masculinity, that's the model of masculinity. If this is resonating, if something in you is saying, yeah, I needed to hear this, please share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a mate who needs it. Hit subscribe so that next time you don't miss what's coming out. This stuff matters. And the more we talk about it, the fewer men die in silence. If you want to support this kind of work, the kind that's trying to build something real, something grounded, something that just doesn't just chase clicks, you can do that through Patreon. The link's in my description. That's what keeps this channel honest and independent. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need to dominate to lead. You don't need to die in silence to be a man. My name's Jacob, and this might be church.